Welcome to episode 97. Fuck you. Fuck you, Rod. Welcome to X-Men 97, episode 7. It's been a long Thursday of Cyclops is Waiting for Me, an X-Men animated recap podcast. I'm JC, and obviously I am tired. Usually Rod is the tired one. I'm taking it over today.
And I'm Rod, and I have not slacked on being tired duties. So, but luckily, this was. I know we curse ourselves every time we say this.
Why don't say it's going to be a quick one, because that means it's going to be 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Not a quick one, a straightforward episode. Well,
you've said that before too.
Yeah, straightforward, but. And we'll get into this, but after the episode aired and you and I were talking, I was like, you know what I kind of like about this? I have no idea what's going on. But in a way that, like, it was like watching the original show for the first time.
Right.
Because obviously I don't keep up with, like, the comics and stuff. And so I only knew about, like, our surprise guest that wasn't really a surprise because of everybody's speculation that do read comics and stuff. And
we actually don't have a guest this week.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool, because everything else I kind of gathered, even this one after I watched it, I kind of gathered some stuff. Even with what I'm kind of predicting, I don't even really know how that's going to play out. So anyway, Cyclops is Waiting for Me is our weekly podcast series where we're going back and watching every single X-Men animated episode we can find. This podcast started with the original 1992 X-Men animated series, building up to this moment, the release of X-Men 97.
Some quick reminders. We are a recap podcast about an episode that aired less than 1 week ago. There are going to be spoilers. If you don't want it spoiled for you, tough shit. But, I don't know, pause the podcast, watch the episode, then come back. We're not affiliated or sponsored by Disney, Disney Plus, Marvel Animation.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Cyclops IWFM Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, and Facebook. And, of course, to make sure to follow us on all your favorite podcast services. There's a bunch of photos of us with, like, some of the voice cast from the show now on there. So,
oh yeah, Digital LA, and then Isaac, who is the voice of Bishop, actually put us into his own carousel of photos from Scum and Villainy, which was pretty dope.
Yeah, that was cool. I saw that when I finished in Hollywood today. That sounded way too pretentious. It's not. I'm not in a movie or anything.
I want to dox the location you were at, right. But I know I can't do that because it makes it actually sound douchey again.
It's worse, yeah. But I saw that notification after I finished up what I was working on today, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And we've had Isaac on the show, and I didn't have no reason to think that he wouldn't, but like. It was just kind of cool to see, like, oh, yeah, he knows me like that. He knows my name.
And one important thing before we get into the episode, this upcoming Saturday after this episode releases, May the 4th, 2024, we're going to be a part of a podcast showcase at Free Comic Book Day at Golden Apple Comics, which is on the corner of Melrose and La Brea in Los Angeles, along with some amazing other podcasts. It looks like we're going to be around a 12:30 time slot, but make sure to stick to our Instagram to find out the exact time. There are going to be tons of friends and their podcasts that are there, including Joe Russo's Hollywood Hangover, Jonathan London's Geekscape, Davis and the crew from Star Wars, the Old Canon Book Club, and more. And we're actually going to be joined by Matt Robb, who joined us previously on the X-Men HeroClix unboxing.
Very cool.
Now on to the show. We are going to attempt to talk about season 1, episode 7, titled Bright Eyes, which I spelled wrong in the script. It aired on April 24th of 2024. Currently sits at an 8.8 star rating on IMDb. And the only thing I'm going to say before we get into the weeds on this episode is I absolutely thought there would be a lot more Cable in this episode based on the name.
Same. Wasn't that one of the first things I texted you was like, so this ended up not being a Cable episode?
Yeah. Like, he's there, but he's barely there.
Yeah, I don't know. But I guess he was kind of the he wasn't even the point. Nope. I don't know. I don't have any justification for it.
No, the Purple People Eater was the point.
Right? Oh. Which, man, what if they couldn't have gotten the rights for that song for this episode? There's very few other songs that would fit that context.
Yeah. Very true. So things kick off. We get our previously on, this time voiced by Rogue. Very appropriate because of how heavy she is the focus of this episode. And, you know, it's not a ton of stuff in here. It's mostly focused on the history of Trask and Gyrick, as well as, you know, that reminder about how Gambit's death went down. So we go into the intro, and I believe this is the first week where there were literally 0 new segments inserted into it. We definitely got the One Man's Worth segment included in it, which I don't know if you saw, but shout out to anybody who's watching. There is a recommendation to watch One Man's Worth before the next episode airs, just as a reminder for people.
That was really vindicating, because before I heard about that, I was just telling a friend who was worried about catching up with the original series before starting this one. And I was like, well, if you don't want to wait, I would just watch the last episode of this 92 series, then watch this episode, and while you're waiting on new episodes, watch the original show, you know. But then last night I was like, hey Max, you're gonna want to just watch One Man's Worth. Like, I don't even know why, but there's just too many references.
Well, when we get towards the tail end of it, I'll throw out my theory on that.
Yeah. And before the theme song this time, it sounded like they were doing something with the percussion. It was like a heartbeat. I guess maybe the only thing I can think of is maybe they were like referencing, you know, everything that happened in Genosha, maybe Gambit specifically or something.
Right.
It'd be interesting to talk to the Newton brothers someday about like what either direction or choices or both they made for the little, like the opening stinger of the theme song each time, because like maybe about 50% of the time it's a little bit different.
Well, Rod, you're the music guy. I'll get in touch with literally everybody else. You're in charge of the music stuff. So,
all right, Newton brothers, if you're out there, this guy you've never heard of wants to know.
Yep. So speaking of the heartbeat and things going wrong, the episode kicks off with the funeral, and we actually finally see the funeral that we were talking about from the original trailer. Because you and I had theorized about this at the beginning that, well, we knew Xavier wasn't dead because he got pulled into space. So it either needed to be a fake funeral or somebody was going to die during the season. And obviously this was the latter of those scenarios.
Man, after episode 2, part of the reason I was flipping tables was I was going to be like, it's fucking Storm, isn't it?
If they depowered Storm and then killed her, that would have been extra fucked.
This show would have had a new host by that point. Like, I'd have been like, okay, I'm out, guys.
And then I would have had to learn how to edit audio, and we would have been really fucked as they're bringing the casket to be put in the ground. You had members of the Thieves Guild, in particular Belladonna, who was Gambit's love growing up. You had Bobby, who was his brother. You had Pierre, who was the gray-haired member of the Thieves Guild. And then this was confirmed by New Rockstar, so I'll give them full credit on it. The woman with the black hair with the white that a lot of people online were speculating was like Bobby's girlfriend or something like that.
Oh, okay.
People are saying it's Aurora, or sorry, New Rockstars is saying it's Aurora from Alpha Flight. And there was a little bit of like, well, why would she be there for that? And the only connection I could think of is Aurora was on Slave Island, the original Genosha episode, when Gambit was there as well. So, you know, maybe they're implying that she survived Genosha and maybe her brother Northstar didn't, you know. Regardless of that part, there is at least a little bit of a connection from Slave Island, but I couldn't find anything else with my history of the characters as to why Aurora would be there. But again, that's what New Rockstars confirmed who it was. So
yeah, I mean, overall, it was like a weird guest list for that funeral, right? Because even Belladonna being like his almost fiance.
Yeah, I mean, he was a scoundrel. So we see that Nightcrawler is, I mean, I don't think he's an ordained priest, but he's essentially ministering the rites of the funeral. I could be saying that wrong. I apologize if I do. And then what I loved before we get into Nightcrawler's actual comments about Gambit, I pointed this out to Rod that it just stood out to me so much. After Beast had kind of walked away from the casket, they made sure that Jubilee handed off an umbrella to Beast and he opened it. And that was just a level of animation detail that just elevates the show. Like there's not another way to describe that for me. It's like it is the modern generation's animation that, as great as Batman the Animated Series and X-Men 92 were, there were certain little things like that you would get from a live action TV show of a level of quality. Obviously, some shows were trash back then too, but animation would never get that kind of consideration. And I love that this is what we're seeing here.
The little details like Roberto and Jubilee holding hands. It's like
right after the handoff.
And
totally.
And no music. It's dead silent. They just like let the rain, you know, kind of be the noise. And they just kind of hung on to the group shot. Someone's going to make that like a wallpaper or something, right? Because it's like a really beautifully drawn like still.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I don't know enough about the animation process on this. If they like, I would love it if stills existed from this, but I don't know if they actually do. I think they may all be animated via like some sort of computer animation. Like I don't think single frames exist here.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I just meant like screen cap.
Oh no,
Yeah.
totally. No, but just when you're talking about like it being
Like
drawn and stuff, yeah, like I don't think they exist for this. And if they do and I'm wrong, that'd be amazing because I would love to have one of these, but I don't think they do in the modern era at this point. Who knows?
I couldn't find it in my third. Everybody here knows now. Both of us end up watching this 3 times now.
Yeah, if not for Scum and Villainy, we would probably only watch it twice. But in quick aside, tell me if you felt differently. I felt like last night was the loudest Scum and Villainy has been in the weeks that we have gone to the event.
It definitely felt louder. I also wasn't sure if it was because
where we sat.
Yeah, we sat. It's hard to describe the geography of this if you weren't there. Basically, we were sat directly underneath the main screen that everybody was watching. So maybe we were just in the path of the cheering or something. But there was a lot to cheer for too, and that event has built up enough like hearsay. I feel like that people are like, oh shit, we gotta go because you never know who's gonna show up.
Yeah, I mean, I literally was talking to somebody who hadn't been to previous ones, and they're like, I'm coming for at least episode 8 and 9. So
yeah.
And the cool surprise that happened at this week's was originally Isaac, who's the voice of Bishop, was advertised to be there. Lenore just happened to join as well. So we got a double treat of them, and thanks to Uncanny Experience and Digital LA for putting that on, because we were in so many pictures with the cast that got posted. Like our Instagram today, I've had to actually mute it a few times when I've been on calls. So
nice.
It's the good problem to have.
Yeah, my brother messaged me. He's like, "Are you in a photo with the X-Men cast?" I was like, "Yeah, I wasn't to say a long story, but it's a random story."
Yeah,
it just kind of because we both went out for like a group shot. And then all of a sudden we're right next to Isaac and Lenore. That was just how it worked out. They stuck them between us. And so we got separated, but we were just like following directions. And then they're like, smile. We're like, oh, hey. Okay. Oh, hey. Yeah. There we go.
Rod, I would love for you to talk about the comments that Nightcrawler had, because I know you had some really insightful thoughts around those. So.
Yeah, I've already loved Nightcrawler anyway in general. I loved him in 92, but I really love how he's written in 97. I even posted this. I try to, reserve some of my hot takes on social media, but like I posted this on all my socials. It's like, I think more church leaders need to take notes from Nightcrawler in 97 because he's very religious, I guess Catholic specifically, but like not judgmental whatsoever. And also has like takes and says things that I feel like are very representative of the religion, but also stuff I would never hear or very rarely, if at best, hear from the pulpit. Like in a previous episode, he said, love is best measured by forgiveness. I was like, yeah, that checks out. Those are the red letters in the Bible. But like, I can't ever remember a single pastor growing up saying that. And in this one...
And just for context, like you went to church frequently with your family growing up. Like that was... It wasn't like me where I was raised Catholic or raised Roman Catholic, quote unquote, but I was in Catholic school, but I didn't go to church on Sundays. It was just like there. I got confirmed because my grandparents wanted me to be confirmed, not because I was actually like going to be confirmed,
Yeah. And we grew up, or my brother and I and my family grew up Presbyterian. And then like when I got a little bit older, we went to non-denominational, which I know for people outside the church sounds wild because it is a denomination.
Right.
And my brother is a pastor currently out in Tennessee. And so we talk about this stuff all the time. But then during this, I guess, is it eulogy? I don't even know what to call. Like, yeah, he's just kind of overseeing this funeral. Nightcrawler uses a lot of gambling references, which also something I don't hear used a lot in positive light in church experiences. Basically talk about like how Gambit, between his powers being about kinetic energy, always new possibilities, and always knew like gambling and stuff, and believed in luck would always turn out, which I love. I love the optimism of Nightcrawler because like Nightcrawler, that's not how gambling works, but our luck works. But he spun it into like how Gambit always saw potential in everyone else, but not himself. But the line that really got me was he didn't realize how his sins made him into a hero, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, because and that was a little like kind of not even a subtweet, like a sneaky thing he put in for the Thieves Guild. He was like, born into the swamp, like swamp thieves and stuff. He's like, guys. Yeah,
I kind of loved that being there though, because it did show the dichotomy of the character, the fact that he literally did start out as a criminal and he ended as a hero. So you look at a lot of the themes of X-Men, and one of the ones that is not subtle is the whole evolution concept. And it's like, evolution isn't just physical attributes. Like, you evolve as a human being, person, whatever. Like,
yeah. And especially after watching Remember It like a couple more times, I almost get,
just because you hate yourself,
right? Well, it was everywhere, right? Especially that moment. And I almost feel like we were supposed to get that Gambit like knew he was sacrificing himself. Like, it wasn't gonna
absolutely.
Yeah, it wasn't gonna be a walk away moment. Like, he knew that was gonna be the tough
when
call.
he did the charge. Even before he got the stab in the side, I think he was going to literally blow himself up to take out the Wild Sentinel.
Yeah, something. Yeah. And then Nightcrawler ends this, and I guess I don't know if we've ever seen this from him. Is in '97 at least, is because Nightcrawler's always smiling, and he was smiling through this eulogy. And then at the end, he broke and he cried, and I was like, "Wow!" And you had mentioned before the animation on his eyes, like how glowy they are, and it's like really cool.
Yeah, they were not restricted to the outline; like they actually like were lit. It wasn't just yellow irises and stuff like that.
And somehow, I think they made it look really earnest. Because I think if you would have described that to me, like if I was telling this to a friend, he's like, "That sounds kind of cheesy." I'm like, "Yeah, but when you see it, it was like really good."
And then at that point, they lower the casket into the ground, which was, now I think at this point we have seen every single scene from the original trailer. I think that was the last one we had not seen on camera yet.
That makes sense, because these last 3 episodes are both like this is the finale, right?
Yeah.
But also, Bo DeMaio has said on like social media that these last 3 episodes are like his masterpiece, basically, right? So
they're gonna be big is essentially the the paraphrase of it.
Which,
so
I know that we always prep ourselves for the next episode doing more than we ever think the previous one did. I don't know what to expect now.
So it jumps over to a little bit later. It looks like the Thieves Guild have left, and Jubilee is venting about Rogue not being there. That he sacrificed himself and saved her, loved her. Wolverine gives kind of the whole, like, people deal with grief in different ways. And then we get the other side of Nightcrawler of the, like, I survived this and I saw this. And she has every right to be afraid.
Nightcrawler tells Logan to shut the fuck up.
Before we jump over to the next scene, I do want to point out one question that I had pending was I was worried that my girl Boom Boom was a part of the casualties. It was actually because of the previously on where there was the reminder shot of Nightcrawler on the rooftop, where it was the guy who I jokingly said looked like Peter Parker was also on that rooftop, and Boom Boom was there too. That was before Gambit made the sacrifice, which means Boom Boom would not have been one of the bodies because that rooftop ended up being safe.
Okay,
so I owe Gambit as well for Boom Boom being alive, basically.
Hopefully she's not the next sacrifice.
Here's the problem. You can't sacrifice somebody that only 6 people give a fuck about. There's a small group of us. We're very happy with her, but I don't think anybody else would.
They overheard you talking at Scum and Villainy, and they're like, now we got to write it into season 2.
Yeah. I may have threatened one of the writers if they had killed Boom Boom. But jump over, and this was actually the preview clip that Marvel had shared early on Tuesday, which was Rogue in the desert. And holy shit, this was an anime fight scene.
Yeah, I love it. You sent me a little screenshot of it, and your screenshot didn't spoil anything for me, but I actually did a good job this week about not seeing the preview clips.
And I specifically was like, I'm not going to send Rod a link to stuff because I knew you were trying to avoid those. I didn't bother. It's too much.
Yeah, but I had to say, I have to actively fight for 12 hours to not watch those clips, because it's not a full 24 hours they release the clips.
It comes out usually around noonish on the West Coast, or even 9 a.m., but I'm not awake until noon. So,
but then everybody's sharing it. I'm like, I guess I get it. So it's my job to not go into those spaces, but sometimes it's
but then you don't complain about it, which is you're like, okay, I have accepted this risk.
Right. Yeah. But also then every once in a while something catches me where a friend I didn't know was into X-Men shares something. I'm like, God damn it.
So it's either Collard or Bollard. I couldn't tell because it's a little weird thing. One of the writers on the episode, that is their last name. So if it's Bollard, that's what it was. Otherwise, I'm seeing stuff and I thought it was C. There's this big crater landing as Rogue goes into this secret base, and she does this big ground pound that's very reminiscent of fighting games of punching the ground, shit pops up. And then everybody calls this the Marvel vs. Capcom dropkick. And this is where I just want to go into clarity on this. So, yes, the jump in the air, do a somersault while holding her legs is absolutely some sort of reference to Marvel vs. Capcom because it's such a specific combination. But the actual dropkick itself is not the same body positioning as that dropkick. The arms are in different positions and stuff like that. The classic Japanese live action series Kamen Rider actually created that shot, and it has been referenced thousands of times probably across animated stuff, including the one that I recognized it the most from, which was Evangelion.
Yeah, it's like that distorted perspective shot, right, where the foot's the biggest thing and there's like action lines coming off of it.
And there's like the other leg is like half bent, and the foot that is in the foreground and doing the kicking is like at an unnatural angle as well. It's like, oh, if you make contact kicking that way, you're gonna like snap your ankle, I feel like.
I think it's also the way a lot of fighting games like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat and stuff have some of their fighters do their air kicks and stuff.
Right.
We're like, oh, nobody can actually make airtime with that, but that's cool looking.
Yeah. One of my favorite things from this fight scene, though, is we've talked about this in the past too. Rod watches with captions on. I do not until I do my rewatch to take notes. And there are great lines from these soldiers who are all panicking as this is happening, where somebody's like, kill her, kill the mutie. Like they're so like freaked out and scared. And then there are these weird walker things, which I don't think have been established before.
Oh, yeah.
But Rogue picks up one and beats the other one with it.
It's very, I guess if you haven't seen Godzilla and Kong, it's not really a spoiler, it's in the trailer. When you see Kong pick up like little Kong and like beat down all the other Kongs, that's a very similar energy. Also worth seeing for that scene.
There was a great post. I wish I could recognize the name of the creator off the top of my head, but they literally said they went to the movie, saw that scene, it's at the 20-minute mark of the movie, and then left after. And I thought they were going to be like, because I was offended. And they were like, because it literally couldn't get better than that. And I felt like I got my money's worth.
I laughed when you sent me that because I was like, I get what he's saying. I kind of wish he would have stayed to see the rest of it. But my favorite line during that part was when someone on the official announcement, not just the soldiers, was like, you're attacking a secret military base. It's like, thank you for announcing the secret military base.
I feel like you could have said like secure military base, but like, saying it's a secret kind of defeats the purpose. Yeah.
Or just not announcing anything and just defending it. I don't know.
Yeah. And going into this week, we knew that there was going to be something around the larger Marvel cast of characters involved with it. What I wasn't expecting is as they went into this base, seeing General Thunderbolt Ross. And dude, nailed the voice of the MCU actor who had unfortunately passed away. It was William Hurt, correct?
I think so, yeah. And now it's Harrison Ford, right?
Correct. But yeah, had I not known he had passed away, I wouldn't have thought it was a voice match. It was so spot on to that character from, all the Sokovia Accord conversations. And like, I blocked out Incredible Hulk, but like, but the more recent appearances by him, it was nailed it. He crushed that role.
Yeah, that was the 3 points that actually got me to recognize someone. So yeah. I saw the Ross on his shirt, and then his voice sounds similar. But then as soon as he said, like, this base is meant to, trap the Hulk, I was like, oh, this is Thunderbolt
Ross.
Hold
the Hulk, yeah.
Hold the Hulk, yeah. I was like, this is Thunderbolt Ross. What a random cameo.
Yeah. So Rogue pops in through the ceiling. I'll also credit this one to New Rockstars. The thing that busts through the ceiling looks like the cage that they used to hold the Hulk in one of the movies, as well as what they used to hold Abomination when seen in She-Hulk.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Like that big circular thing is effectively the roof and the floor because it is unbreakable. So the way that Eric Voss mentioned it was essentially they use that to smash into the building because if you can't break it, you could use it as a smashing tool.
Yeah, that's what Rogue said. Like Daddy always said, it was easier to break into prison than out.
Yeah. So she goes to Ross and is asking, where are Trask? Where are Gyrick? And Ross gives the sarcastic, what? I thought you guys were the good ones. And then we see like Rogue has, and I'm not saying this in a judgmental way. This is just, it is what it is. Rogue has snapped. And she's like, well, you killed all those. So now you got me.
I love that line. It got me wondering too, though, is this, because we're going to see something later from Beast that kind of backs this version up, this idea up. But I didn't know at that time, like, is it implying that she thinks the government had something to do with it? Or
that's how I'm getting it.
okay.
Is like, even if you're not the one who directly created it, you didn't stop it, so you're at the very least complicit.
So I did, but my other thing that I think might be for me more likely is that the mutants have started drawing the line in the sand of like you people and us,
right?
Like humans. So you're a non-mutant human. You're all responsible for this, And
a little more of the like Magneto Brotherhood mentality kind of scenario.
Because like you said, she snapped, and I kind of like I like that she's finally living up to her name, because I don't think besides the Cure in the previous series, she's actually gone rogue on anything, right? And this one, she's gone like violent rogue.
Right. And we chatted about that previously with regard to X-Men Evolution, because Rogue literally was a rogue in that show. Whereas by the time of X-Men 92, in the character's story, they weren't that version of themselves anymore. They were the team player and such.
Yeah. And so this one, she's like, got nothing left to lose. And I like that it's kind of like stakes, but different. I don't know what you would call it, like motivation, because we've lived with 30 years of, Rogue being, honorable and all that stuff. It's like, it's unrealistic to think that someone stays that way forever and there's no limits that can be pushed.
Yeah, something can push you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I got the impression that she got him to talk. I didn't get the impression that she had actually like absorbed him like what we see later in the episode, though.
Oh, yeah. In my head canon, I would like to think she just snapped his neck and then they moved on.
They need to. They're gonna kill a lot of other shit, Rod. They don't need to just kill him off screen.
I know.
If you're gonna kill him, fucking you get that on screen.
Right.
Yeah. So it cuts over to we never came up with like the main meeting room. That never had a name, did it?
The war room.
Yeah, the war room. And President Kelly is talking to Cyclops via hologram. And we find out it's been a full week since the Genoshan massacre has happened. And they're at a point where they're not finding more survivors yet.
Yeah, or he said no survivors, right?
No more survivors. It's been a week with no survivors.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I mean, I guess they're mutants, and I also don't know how, like, recon missions go and stuff, but I don't think anybody's going to be surviving after a week. I guess we, got proven wrong, but...
I think that is the thing, though, of, like, if there is a disaster, it's an exponential decrease in likelihood of finding a survivor past, like, it's every 24 hours that number drops by such a dramatic percentage, unfortunately.
Yeah, that sucked, because he's saying that, the UN wasn't going to back it up at all anymore. It's like, what?
Yeah. And Cyclops gives the argument of, like, just even finding one more person, the level of hope that would give people would be astounding. It's pointed out that Val Cooper has not been found yet, right. Which, again, I've learned to never doubt Rod, because the theory may come true that it's not authentic Val Cooper and maybe Mystique. And Kelly starts mentioning, like, there's really these unfavorable opinions right now around the mutant race and stuff. And there are scared voters that he has to worry about if they see that it looks like he's backing their kind. And Cyclops obviously pissed off. And it's a weird threat, non-threat, I think is maybe the best way to phrase it, where Kelly says, oh, you gotta chill, because I gotta make sure somebody who is like not as big of a fan of mutants doesn't get into this position, because I'm the last ally you have, basically, is kind of how I interpreted it.
Yeah, no, I got that too. And like, I see that point. That point actually gets brought up later again by somebody else. And even though I see that point, I'm still like, man, fuck them. Because like that, the better of the worst choices. I don't know. Like, this is something.
Yeah. It's a lose-lose. It's just how big of a loss is it, and that sucks from a leader. Yeah.
And what was it? Kelly specifically used the term optics, and this was Cyclops was like, optics. Huh?
Yep. He tells Cyclops to be patient, and Cyclops is like, yeah, all the headlines right now are what happens when you are patient. And he gives a very satisfying slam on a big red button to turn off the hologram.
Yeah. That was one of the cheers that's coming villainy.
That was one of the cheers that's coming. Here's the thing. I was not actually expecting that one to get a cheer. That one totally, like, everybody was into that. So
I think that filled the
people
need.
Like Cyclops now. That's the problem.
Isn't that weird? Yeah.
Yeah.
But also,
for us to say that.
Yeah, I think that's also, there's some like internal satisfaction that everyone wants to feel what it feels like to hang up on the president.
Jean pops into the war room. Scott's like, yep, we're on our own. He starts from what I've imagined is him doing this all week of like, it's my fault. I got too comfortable. Magneto saw it coming. So did Madeline. And he gets like this little like, oh, sorry, I'm making it awkward again. And then we see a little bit of a turnaround from Jean from what we had seen in the previous interactions around Maddie, especially after she saw him psychically talking with her thousands of miles away, where it was like, oh, after Storm left, it was kind of nice to possibly have a sister. And I was not expecting that, honestly.
She suddenly remembered she made out with Logan 20 minutes earlier. She's like, okay, well, no, but the only thing kind of like frustrating me about this scene is they didn't address her hair being down at all.
Dude, that's okay. Let's chat about that, because like I could see this as like multiple version. Like, is this a scenario where like some part of Maddie's consciousness is now in Jean? Is it just like now they, from a technical mechanical perspective, don't feel the need to differentiate between the two? It definitely was like that was a conscious choice for that to happen.
Yeah, because I've seen people online and stuff say like, well, Jean's had her hair down in 92. It's like, yeah, but they use the specific language in this run to differentiate for us, specifically in that uniform. So
right.
Usually when her hair was down in 92, she was like in a evening gown or something, like not in the uniform. So I thought they were signaling that Madeline had survived, and then they started talking. I was like, oh, it's not her. And then, later on we get pretty much a confirmation that it is Jean. And I'm like, okay, I guess that, but in the back of my head, the non-serious part of Rod was Jean like, is this what you like? Was it Rebecca Romaine's version of Mystique that she teased Logan and changed it? Or was it one of the Mystiques in one of these X-Men shows? We've watched too many now.
It was definitely live action, but I don't remember which one. But you are right, it was live action.
Okay, so it was either Jennifer Lawrence or Rebecca Romaine that
right.
found
and
Logan.
It was either Logan or it was Xavier.
Yeah, I was like, I can
if it was first class,
whatever you want, and that it was like, I was like, is that what this Jean is like? It's like, well, if all it takes is for me to take my ponytail out, then
to go back to a serious note, they're like, all right, well, is the team ready for this? And I think the only thing that was a little bit shocking to me was they had waited a week before going down to Genosha for the relief efforts.
I mean, I guess
I was a little surprised on that, but I guess maybe it's also they do need to make sure whatever isn't happening up in where they are, because there are riots being mentioned and stuff like that. So I think there's some semblance of like they had to take care of certain things before they could go down there. I mean, literally having Remy's funeral and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
And half the team, being there before, and like God, like the Nightcrawler was knocked unconscious, right? I mean, he woke up, but like there's probably just like being in medical care for a little bit.
Yeah. So at that time, it cuts to Genosha. The Blackbird is landing at the camps, and then we see a few cameos of certain mutants that are there and helping out. I'm just going to go through these quick, Rod. I'm not going to play the game.
Okay.
Watch, this is the one you're like, I have all of them. First one you see is the multi-armed mutate. His name is Barbarous. He's the one who looks like skinny Goro, I think is the best way to describe him. You had the Blob, you had a few multiple men, and then you see Angel. And we've talked about there's the Angel who is Warren Worthington, and then the female Angel who is the one who eventually marries Beak, Rod's mutant. Yeah, it's like spirit animal, but it's kind of like spirit mutant. Yeah. And Beast gave the line that I had to wait until the next day to tell my friend. It was the most perfect line written, and it was "Look for the helpers."
Yeah,
which is a quote from Mr. Rogers, and like I had never heard that growing up, but the phrase had a resurgence around the time of like 9/11 and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Well, just has a lot of echoes of, you can tell that, the writers of the show like lived through that, because it was a similar thing. It was like, maybe you have to wait a few days before you can go searching with great, a bigger group and stuff.
Yep. So Scott is aware that they haven't gone into the Citadel, which is like that big pyramid shaped thing. Says that he and Jean are going to go there. And we see Amelia, who is one of Professor Xavier's exes, who we've established in canon is a nurse. That's how she met Charles in the first place, is actually there doing triage. And she's kind of given the whole, like, it's not necessarily survivor's guilt because she was not at the thing, but it was her kind of just saying, like, seeing the survivors is, like, it's not always going to be a good feeling, especially as it decreases day by day. And some of the survivors aren't going to make their way out of it too.
Yeah, because as she said, seeing survivors makes you want that, like, not want to be one. And then in her thing, when she was doing that speech, who's the guy with the big head? Was that the leader?
So she's kind of flashing back to the early part of the triage. Those were 3 mutates from the Savage Land that were there. You had Brainchild, which is the one you're thinking of with the giant head. Amphibus, or I forgot the one who looks like a frog. And then there's Lupin, who is the one that looked like a werewolf. And then for the first time in the main continuity of the show, Mimic is there. And we've talked about Mimic in the past because Mimic was the one who I believe was the 6th member of the original X-Men team in the comics, who absorbed like multiple powers. So he had Angel's wings, Cyclops' optic blast, Beast's like musculature and stuff like that. The only time we've seen that character previously was One Man's Worth in the alternate present.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Which, once again, call back to that episode.
Blink if and you can miss it scenario as Amelia is looking or remembering the triage station. It looks like Nature Girl, who is the girl who had the deer antlers, was one of the survivors that was in that room behind like a pale person in the front who looked weirdly like an alternate Sinister. I don't think they're taking that route, but there was like a dude who was very, very white, and I was like, no, they wouldn't do that to us. Everybody would know who he was, you know?
Yeah, they're like, you don't belong here.
Trish Tilby arrives, and Beast is like, I'm glad that it's you, because if somebody is going to bear witness to the death of the dream, because Beast and her in the comics had a relationship, point blank. Okay. Like, they had, like, a thing going on. And that was kind of hinted at in the previous episode where they were flirting a little bit during the interview and such. So I think it's kind of like there's some sort of feeling there. And that's why he's like, well, if it's going to be somebody I'm going to talk to about this, you're the one that makes sense. I did appreciate that Trish literally like waved off the cameraman of like, this is not the shit to capture right now. After we had already talked about the fact that when stuff was hitting the fan during like the drama part, those cameramen were catching everything on camera.
Yeah. So, and then she reaches out and holds his hand.
Yep. So we jump over, we see a cabin in the snow, and we see a motorcycle with some very specific army imagery on it. And this one, I'm going to see if you can even have a guess. I'm not expecting you to get this part right. The license plate said AVA-10. Are there any guesses as to what that means, Rod?
Something with Avengers?
You're halfway there.
Because the AVN.
Yep. So that's the first half.
But the A10, is it like an issue number or something?
You're very close.
Because I don't know the comics, so it's a specific issue number of the Avengers?
So the A10 likely has something to do with annual.
Okay. And
Avengers Annual number 10 was the first appearance of Rogue in the comics ever.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So like we've talked about, like, that is a true Easter egg. That is something that is buried, that if you know it, you know it. And if you don't, it has no impact on the plot. That is what an Easter egg is.
Yeah.
I cannot emphasize this enough. Saying this character appears in the episode and they are talking and have a like important part of the episode is not an Easter egg.
Yeah, it's a regular egg.
I hate you.
Okay, so when the mid-season trailer dropped and we saw the yellow boot and everybody was speculating, like, who is it? Blah, blah. I have to admit, even though she was right there, I never suspected Rogue to be the yellow boot.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know if it was like the coloring or something, but I was not expecting it. I also don't know why, for some reason, I was like, I thought it was going to be like at the mansion that the shield popped. And it was just like in the winter and they were dealing with stuff. I don't know why I didn't think it was going to be another location.
Oh, yeah. I guess I didn't think about where I was going to be, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yep. So the shield lands right in front of Rogue's feet and we get Captain America. And then Rogue refers to him as America's top cop.
And when she holds up the shield, it has scuffs on it. I don't know if that was just to age it or because I don't know anything. But now this show, I don't know what's going to be a callback. It feels like everything's going to be a callback. That's going to be in reference to something that happened.
Yeah. It was interesting because of the way that it was drawn is it didn't look specifically like a claw mark. And it also had like depth to it too. Like towards the center, the mark was skinnier and it got wider as it went up. So that could just be a shadowing choice.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I saw a lot of speculation on like Twitter and Instagram about that, honestly.
I stopped reading the speculations when I saw someone say like, "Oh, it was from Battle of Wakanda with Thanos." I'm like, "My dude, this is 97."
My response on those is I literally have like a note on my computer that just says what universe the Marvel Cinematic Universe is and what universe the X-Men animated, which does cross over with the other 90s cartoons. So those are all one world.
Yeah.
And I literally just paste those numbers and I don't say anything else at this point.
Yeah. But even if it was like those events in that universe, you know, their version is 97. That was like a literally.
It was literally like 22 years or. No, because it was
2023 or 2024, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, just way. Also, not everything has to be connected like that. It's probably something else if it's anything.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything. My personal vibe is it's just a shading choice.
Yeah.
But that's not a hill I'll die on. There are lots of hills I'll die on this show. That's not one of them. Boom Boom being alive. That's a hill for me.
The voice actor for Captain America, it might have just been coincidence or something else, but or maybe more deep. But I looked at IMDb last night. According to IMDb, this is the same voice as Captain America in What If. Okay, purposeful or just friends hiring friends? Who knows?
Oh, it could also be just a logistics thing of we want all of our animated Caps to be the same voice as long as it's Steve Rogers. So that way, what we've talked about with multiverse stuff off of the show is, in most worlds, Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So almost every Peter Parker will sound the same. Yeah. Go to the Madam Web story of Spider-Man 94. Those Peters all had the same voice.
Yeah.
So I that's my vibe on it, is as long as it's not a different person being the character, then it makes the most sense for it to be the same voice. And this is another thing in the multiverse. A What If is just a small alternate story that, I don't care about the interconnected What If stuff. That's actually the part I like about it the least. But all the different standalone worlds, that's what I dig. So
you gotta wonder too if it was also kind of extension of logistics you were saying. What if they wanted to keep this part of X-Men 97 secret, so it was just easier to have the same guy doing Cap, okay, here's your next line.
Yeah, he could have thought it was a What If episode.
Yeah.
So they go into this cabin. She mentions that she's looking for Gyrick and Trask. Apparently so is Cap. They mess with the radio, they put it to a certain frequency, and you see there's an underground base that totally felt like Camp Lehigh. It was the AI version of Armin Zola.
Yeah.
So it totally had that kind of vibe. But then you start seeing OZT on a bunch of the screens.
And up until last night, I had no idea what that meant. Even when we were watching it again, I was like, I don't know what OZT is. Thanks to the internet, and now that I wasn't trying to avoid a
now you know the full history of OZT.
In pieces, yeah, because everybody's posting what it stands for, just in little bits and pieces. Everybody's posting oh, it's in this, and this is the issue numbers. Okay.
If you don't want to know what it stands for, skip 10 seconds. I'll keep it to 10 seconds starting now. It stands for Operation Zero Tolerance, which was a UN-backed military program around stopping mutants.
There you go.
2, 3. Continued. Cool. You missed the spoiler. Good job. So they realize that at some point, Gyrick got transferred to Mexico City, and he needs to get the thumbs up to go down there and extract him. And Rogue is like, well, let's move now. And this whole time, she's been holding his shield. It didn't just feel like that was conscious on her part to it. It felt like it was conscious on Cap's part, too, of I'm not trying to take my biggest weapon, quote unquote, back. I'm okay with you having my one form of defense, because that's how much Cap wants Rogue to trust him.
I guess I could see that. This wasn't my favorite Cap, but I don't think he was supposed to be.
So, anyway. And you've probably seen a little bit about this online too. Cap is saying, I got to play it by the books. This suit can't be seen busting in and destroying part of Mexico City. I got to get the thumbs up for it. Cap has pushed back on the powers that be multiple times in the comics. At one point he retired and became Nomad, and somebody else took up the shield. When Civil War in the comics, the first one came out, he literally busted out of a government building or shield facility or something like that. But when it has come to mutants, Cap has not always had as strong of a stance in helping them. And there are times he's tried to rectify it. He does the Unity Squad, which has led to the comics. There are 2 iterations of it now called the Uncanny Avengers, where it is a mix of non-mutants and mutants fighting together and such. But his gut instinct, especially in the 90s, was not always putting mutants first. It was, you gotta wait and play by the rules, and then I could help you.
Yeah, and I think Rogue even kind of calls us out earlier when they first meet, because she says that, you know, they did this thing in Genosha, and then Cap is like, they did this to all of us, and she's kind of like, huh, really?
Well, his specific phrasing on it was, because he's immediately followed it up with saying, it shamed all of us.
That's right. And she's like, yeah, that's not, because he's trying to paint himself as like a little bit more than an ally, like, oh, I'm one of you too. And she's like, not really. Like,
yeah.
I do like how they called out what we had said before. Like, anyone that had grown up with only the MCU as their Marvel is about to find out that the mutants are the real heroes and the Avengers have been the cops all along.
Right.
And she said, you know, top cop or whatever. And him playing by the book is like, I get it, you're a soldier, but like, that hasn't gotten the same thing Scott told the president. Like, look where that got everybody.
Yeah.
You know?
To his point about, like, you know, running down into Mexico and busting down whatever this location is sends a message. And Rogue goes, yeah, that you stand with mutants unless you don't. And he's like, this is where I got to play it by the book. And she goes, okay, well, if your hands are tied, you don't need this. And then there's this fantastic shot of her busting through the ceiling and launches that thing like she should be the ultimate Frisbee champion of the entire planet. She launches that shield into the side of a mountain.
It's so far away, you don't even see the snow impact. You just see like the shine, like a star.
Yeah, it literally is just like, and that's the last flash of light hitting it before it's like buried in 30 feet of snow.
I would love to see Cap calling back for reinforcements for that one. It's like, so what happened again? It's like, well, okay, so
this girl, which the ultimate way to get made fun of in the army in the 90s is to start with this girl through my shield. That's literally all it is. That's the entire story.
Yeah.
Shield resources put to work. Jumping back to Genosha, you do know who this character was, though, right, Rod?
Yeah,
carrying the giant pallet.
Strong guy. I don't think I've ever heard him voiced, though.
Don't believe he was voiced in 92. If he was, it was like a single line kind of scenario in that X Factor Cold Comfort episode.
And I remember back then we did you did the research and found out that he was an 80s character, but to me he's just really coded as a 90s guy. And
oh yeah, he absolutely has 90s vibes. At one point in the comics, he becomes the king of hell.
Oh, there you go. And he definitely sounds like they caught that 90s energy well, because he like tosses a box to Roberto and Jubilee and is like, get ready for a war, kids. I'm like, well, you said that with a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah. His name is also Guido, so like interpret that as you see fit. So Jubilee and Sunspot start having this conversation between the two of them of like, well, do you think there's going to be a war? And Jubilee mentions how she hasn't heard from her foster parents for a few months, but they even called now to check on her and stuff because they're worried about one coming. And we go back to, you know, kind of what we've been seeing about Roberto for this entire season, where he has lied to his parents about where he is right now, that, you know, he's on like a ski trip in the Alps or something like that. Mm-hmm. Jubilee starts, you know, being like, you really should tell him. And I think to what we had heard, especially from Bo, when he mentioned how like the Pulse nightclub shooting and stuff like that played a big part into his pitch for what this season was. This story felt like it was a reaction to Pulse to me.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, now you say that, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I like how Jubilee put it. She's like, we could have been here.
Yeah.
And then
your family would have been confused because they wouldn't have even known you were here, and they only find out who you were after you're gone.
Yeah. And so she was like, I don't want them to have to bury a stranger or find out on the 5 o'clock news. Like, oh, that's rough. I've had some friends or at least acquaintances and stuff that like the news is broken that way before. It's like, man, what a shame.
He gives a little bit of pushback of like, and this very much feels like somebody who's dealing with all the stuff that's going on in the modern world right now about like being in the closet of, oh, well, this is what happens when we aren't hiding stuff and you're shoving it down their throat. I think his specific phrasing was put it in their face, but that tends to be the argument of like, why you don't come out and stuff like that, of like, you're so scared to come out that the repercussions of it are those excuses that you keep giving yourself to hold it in kind of scenario.
Yeah, and he has a point, but at the same time, it's like, man, I hate that he or anybody who has to be in the closet like feels like that would be putting in people's faces or shoving it down their throat, because they literally went away separate.
Yeah, they literally segregated themselves.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, yeah, they were literally. People were leaving their countries to come to Genosha. We know that for a fact from the news clip at the end of the last episode of like people were leaving with no intention of coming back. And the only reason they are is because it was decimated.
Yeah. And to your point about the parallels with Pulse, it's like that's a place that no one is required to be at. So if a community has like set aside their own safe space,
yeah,
like that's not shoving it down anybody's throat. If anything, it's like too much of a, I don't know, like not grace, but
weird. You're doing the courtesy of doing whatever behind closed doors.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, we're not welcome in the common area and stuff, then we'll just go do our own thing then, and then you just worry about yourself.
I mean, in a lot of areas, if there is like, regardless of it being a queer bar or a straight bar or whatever it is, most bars don't even have fucking windows. So like you're literally driving by and you see just like the sign has a flag next to it. And that's enough that it's shoving it down your face, which is bullshit. And, Jubilee makes that comment about like, I'd rather not find out they not find out who I was from the 5 o'clock news. And that's where Roberto says, will you come with me? Yeah. And that was a great moment for the character, because it finally hit him as to why it's important, because he's doing it because he's like, I don't want to disappoint my parents and stuff like that. And it's like, don't you think they'd be more disappointed by not knowing who you are? Yeah.
And I like this Jubilee. I know this is part Holly and part, the writers and stuff, but like she's come along. Let's remember like the first time we saw her in Night of the Sentinels, she was basically Roberto, not quite as like actively in the closet, but she kind of was like, a little rogue, so she didn't have like the protections around her and stuff, but she wasn't embracing it at all. And now she's just kind of like literally loud and proud. And then we get a moment like off to the side where they're at a memorial either for all the Morlocks or specifically Leech and Callisto, because that's the picture of them too.
I kind of got a vibe that it was one of those scenarios of like anybody who was a victim, that was the spot, because there were like a few signs that were like, we love you and we miss you and stuff like that. And I think it may just be like they didn't have a lot of pictures to like drop there because people were leaving and such. So I don't think it was specific to Leech and Callisto. I could be totally wrong on that, but it was right in front of the heads of the statues of Magneto and Xavier. So I think it was
just everybody,
the victims, for what that's worth.
I didn't think about that. Yeah, there probably are not a lot of photos of the Morlocks.
Yeah, that's, I mean, if you've literally lived in the sewers for your entire life, like how many times do you have a happy picture that you then got developed? Remember, this is the era you couldn't print pictures yourself for the most part. Like you literally had to drop film rolls off to be developed by people. These
guys might have had to just do it in their own darkroom, right? Because
I don't know if they would have even, like, if you have to steal everything you can, like, they didn't have a good camera. Like, maybe Leech stole a disposable kind of thing.
But maybe like other mutants or something, because Leech is a visible mutant, and Callisto, especially she was this way in 92, but especially in this, like a lot more androgynous, like representing and stuff. So like between all of that, I don't know how comfortable they would have been like just dropping off a film roll like Walmart or CVS,
And I mean, let's call it out what it was. Like, as progressive as the 90s started to become, it was still not the most progressive. And like people who had some sort of disfiguration, like even having like lost an eye with an eye patch on top of being androgynous, like 90s society was not as comfortable as we may think it was in like rose-colored glasses. So.
No, I was very well aware. I was an Asian family in the middle of India. Yeah. So it took all of the good and the bad, but it was different. It was a different time.
And we see the bird girl again, who's at this memorial. As far as I have been able to find, she is not a pre-existing character and is actually some sort of original character that was put into this series. But if somebody from the show wants to correct me on that, please do.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be interesting though, because I guess most of these shows, they introduce like one new character, right? Because we had Spike with Evolution, right?
Yeah, but that was also because they didn't feel like it was right to do a younger version of Bishop, because it wouldn't made it sense with the time travel and such. But yeah.
But like this, because she Yeah, it's like a really emotive scene, and then she literally flies away. That had to have been like aesthetic choice, like kind of the memorial thing. And Beast and Trish are watching this whole thing, and Beast, what did he say?
His
quote?
First priority is damage control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where Trish mentions what I had alluded to earlier about there being riots around the country and the world and such. And then I'm paraphrasing, it's not the exact quote, I didn't write it down, but it was essentially, riots are the language of the oppressed, which came from Martin Luther King. And Trish recognizes that too. Like, she's the one who actually points out that it was an MLK line.
Yeah. And maybe this wasn't an intention, but like I kind of read it as that was like one of the first like ticks that got Beast.
She said the word that bothers me, but it's also with 2024 vision of, oh, well, normal people aren't going to accept that. And it's like, that's where you're saying that you and I are still different at the end of the day.
Yeah. And we had talked about some of this off mic, but like, we feel like, I felt like there was like maybe one more scene that was cut out between Beast and Trish, where she kind of like took it a little further, because this went from like they were holding hands to like she said one thing and then.
Yeah, and it could just be the level of emotion that existed there. But Beast says, well, maybe the professor's view was too nearsighted and that we shouldn't be begging for your tolerance because that was a mistake. And she's like, but that's not what I was saying. He's like, yeah, but that's what you mean. Yeah. Just remember, you were literally capturing reactions as our friends were dying last time.
I like snapped Beast.
Yeah.
Because he's been so logical up until this point.
So I don't know if they'll take it as far as what has happened in the Krakoan era with Beast, of Beast basically going like hardcore militaristic, like ends justify the means Beast. But this was like the first time of like, oh, he's not just, thoughtful quotes and stuff like that. Like he also has his breaking point,
Yeah. We're seeing that neither idea worked, right? That's I think the point of this season is Magneto saying, oh, we should just all be superior in our own little space. That didn't work because I made him a target. And then Professor Xavier's idea of like, let's hold hands with mankind didn't work because mankind don't give a fuck. Yep. So now they're just kind of like, well, I guess we're out here for ourselves.
And then he's like, well, I don't want to waste any more of your tolerance. And then he just bounces on her and leaves.
I cheered at home. I was like, yeah, you tell her.
I think that was also one where you like gave a single laugh and everybody else was quiet at that point.
Yeah, I was like, you go, man.
That happened once last night at Scum where you just like gave the laugh and it was like super quiet. I was like, fuck yeah, Ron.
Yeah.
So jumps over to Rogue in Mexico City. There's that iconic statue at a roundabout that I don't know what that statue is, but I've definitely seen that statue at the establishing shot before.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. And we see that there is this villa that's protected by OZT guards, and there's music playing. Did you figure out what the music was, Rod?
Oh, yeah. It was from the opera Madame Butterfly, or I guess since it was Italian, it's Madama. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Madame.
Well, it's spelled with an A at the end.
That's only if you do the translation. It's fine.
Opera.
It's still Madame Butterfly. Let's be real.
What is funny though is it is an 1800s song or opera, but like they used a 2020 recording. I know it's like a minor detail. I hate people to nitpick like this, but
did you want them to have an 1800s recording?
Well, I mean like the 90s, right? That was the part that was like it's kind of funny.
Nope, original recordings only.
You're right. But this and a later classical piece were actually taken from like the same orchestra. Oh, so it must have just been part of like a licensing library deal or something. This is easy because obviously it's so old that it's public domain, but the recording itself they probably had to like secure some sort of rights for. And
it was one of those where I know I had heard it before, but I don't have the music knowledge that you do, and so there was no way I was going to specifically place it.
I have to be honest, I didn't recognize this one right off the bat. The next one, I was like, oh, I don't know the name of that, but that is we had to do that in college. So this one I think is a little bit more vague. So Gyrick is in this villa and he's basically like messing around with like bugs on like pin boards and stuff like that. This makes sense now. I didn't even think about it because he's pinning butterflies on a board. Okay, so I'm putting this together in real time.
Yep. And then as he's doing this very, very calmly, he starts smirking as he hears like gunfire going off and such.
It was that trope of like mob movies and stuff when the boss knows that
somebody's coming in.
Well, I guess there's no other word for it. The rogue is coming in, like the
assassin.
Yeah, somebody. Yeah.
There's other words. Don't worry. You're just stuck in D&D world. That's why you only think of rogues. Because we can't have a thief or a killer. They have to be a rogue. That's the person who does all the illegal shit on the team. But he points out, he's like, sorry, don't know where Trask is, but just know while you were all like hugging puppies and kissing babies, we also made friends in high places. When he gets asked about who OZT was. So
yeah, super ominous.
Yep. And then my favorite part of it was just like, oh, tell Cyclops his psychic wife's tricks aren't going to work. So he doesn't even know that there's two genes and stuff like that. And he specifically says, not against him. So, this is what we've been alluding to of like, how did he have that level of protection going on and stuff, even with Madeline? And it's like, oh, because there's something in him that was ingrained that was giving him those psychic blockers that a regular human wouldn't be able to have.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Rogue is like, oh, cool. This isn't that kind of probe, which she pulled off a glove.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't even have to speculate, right? Like, they just gave that to us.
Yeah, but she pulls off the glove, grabs his face, and then proceeds to, like, psychically absorb him. And when that happens, there is a super, super fast single, frame of Bastion's face. And then you also see Nimrod's face, rapid fire succession to each other. I missed the Bastion face the first time. It almost was shaped like Professor X to me until I was able to pause and stop it.
Okay, so I didn't see Bastion, but I saw Nimrod, and that was the frame that I alluded to one of my friends. I was like, so, because the friend I was talking to was like confused, like, I don't know who that person is. And I was like, okay, so there's literal frames that refer back to why I told you need to watch One Man's Worth, because there's Nimrod in there.
Yep.
And I think this, even somebody like me who's not, I don't connect all the comic stuff. I was like, I think they're going to connect this back to like Bastion being responsible for everything from 92 on.
We'll get into that in
later.
The theories. Yep. So one thing that New Rockstars said is apparently there is a missing scene. There is a scene between when Rogue blacks out from this and when she later gets like woken up by Nightcrawler. And apparently that is where she is having some sort of breakdown.
Okay.
I think it was probably like one of those like removed for time kind of scenarios.
Yeah. So we missed out like on another like 2 minutes of Lenore screaming.
Yeah, probably. Which, crystal clear, we both love Lenore.
Yeah.
Rod's cat Lucy, not a fan of Lenore screaming.
I mean, I have to turn that down when Rogue goes, crazy.
Yep. In Genosha, we see Cyclops and Jean exploring the Citadel. We see the rats that existed in those psychic flashes that Maddie was having when interacting with Cable. And Jean starts seeing like a psychic imprint of certain people's last moments. So we see Dazzler fall, which we had already speculated that Dazzler was one of the confirmed deaths from being on that rooftop. We see Shaw from the Hellfire Club as rocks are falling on top of him.
With Emma.
Next to Emma.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's right when Jean specifically says last thoughts. So we know that that's Sebastian's last thoughts, not necessarily Emma's last thoughts. And then you see the like half buried body of Squid Boy.
Yeah, they didn't hold anything back on that section. And I like how Jean basically kind of described that world's realistic haunting, right? Because she said everyone's like final imprints like overlapped each other in this time or this
and they
area.
Were all so close to each other that it's all hitting her at once. She mentions like, futures lost, lack of closure, which is what, everybody always fears. Like when something happens, if you're not prepared for it, you didn't get to close out those moments in your life. And then she says, like us. And then Scott gives the right apology because he starts to be like, sorry for making everything so complicated. At first, Jean thinks he's going back to like him feeling guilty about Genosha happening. He's like, no, it's like I made everything complicated with Maddie and everything. And she's like, yeah, life's always complicated. Like, how about those 3 times I died?
She's like, or when I sacrificed myself in the sun, or when
or when the spaceship was falling. Yeah. And then, he points out that she's always come back and they're close to like getting the sense of closure. But before that happens, Jean gets a psychic flash from another telepath and Scott instantly is like, Maddie?
I was waiting for Jean to be like, bitch, say what? Like,
yeah. So there's some sort of like psychic message that Jean sends to all the mutants in the vicinity, except Logan. Logan's the only one that isn't like aware of this. Jubilee actually tells him that like they found somebody, and you see from it looked like an upward shot of like Pride Rock from The Lion King, but you see on like a telekinetic harness, or what's the thing you put somebody on? A gurney. Yeah, like a telekinetic gurney. Emma is on it in full diamond form.
Yeah, I also love how Quick Beast was like, oh, it's diamond transmutation. It's like, wow, like you just kind of pulled that one out of nowhere.
Triggered by the stress of what happened.
Yeah, and she gave the perfect dad joke.
Yep, that she's always done well under pressure, and I groaned.
And the rest of the bar cheered.
Yeah, simultaneously, there was one very disappointed human next to a lot of very excited humans. Quick context, in the comics, the Genoshan massacre is what did trigger Emma's secondary mutation, though.
I think that was the only thing that I expected to see in this episode was the Emma thing, 'cause I'd heard so many people talk about that. I really love the sentimental moment of Jubilee, like, running into Roberto's arms and crying, because it's like, oh yeah, that was the hope that Scott was talking about. They found one person.
Yeah, and Scott actually needs to, like, lift up his visor slightly, and a tear comes out. Jean wipes it, and then they start to hold hands, and then Morph is like, hey, you guys got to get back to the jet right fucking now.
They don't get a break.
JP's delivery in this episode, because we haven't gotten a ton of Morph in other episodes, like we've gotten moments, but Morph kind of like are the highlight lines of the rest of this episode for me.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. So Trask is on comms and is like, yeah, you need to come to where they're holding me up in Madripoor. And, you know, I didn't know what was going on, basically, but come and I will, like, show you the face of the future, of your future, essentially.
He said he would clear the lobby, and everybody's like, what? And to what you're saying, JP was like, to review, Trask created Sentinels, so responsible for all of this.
I do also love the writing on it, though, that it wasn't just like,
IE.
I love putting that in writing. I don't say it enough in real life, and I love the delivery from Morph on it. Also, the diet is never out in the vending machine.
I like how, that implies that, like, no one gets the diet soda. So that would mean that I would be unlocking secret doors everywhere, because I'm one of the few people that, like, I'm not...
You'd be shot and killed.
Right. I don't necessarily like diet soda because I'm trying to, like, lose weight or whatever. It's just the normal sodas, or especially with the corn syrup, is way too sweet. So I generally just drink diet sodas. So I'm just imagining... Because I'm the one that goes up to the vending machine in, like, July and hits diet soda, and a Santa can comes out. You know, because, like, oh, nobody uses that, Rod. So I'd be like, okay, with Sentinel secret base.
Nope. At this point, we actually see that the team splits up. Mm-hmm. So going to New York, Roberto and Jubilee are going to, like, their tower, whatever, you know, not Trump Tower that they're living in. And you find out that Roberto's mom, as they have two butlers, right? There were two butlers there.
That's probably a whole staff. And then we just saw the two.
Yeah, and the mom is drinking her afternoon wine. This is probably a weekday. I guarantee this is like a Thursday.
I didn't even notice this until someone at the bar started yelling chug, but she just one gulp the entire glass.
It definitely gives, like, Real Housewives vibes. Yeah. So Jubilee is, like, psyching him up and, like, you got this. You know, you're going to go in, you're going to be charming, you're going to make small talk. And then the first thing he does is just drops it straight, I'm a mutant. And her delivery is fantastic because she's like, or you could just do that. Yeah, that was good.
We needed something lighthearted after that. And that was very much a 90s sitcom kind of like style cut.
Yeah, very much that sitcom vibe to it. And then that's where the mom literally chugs an entire glass of wine. And then she's like, this is such a relief. And I was actually talking with Guy, who voices Sunspot, about this, where this was the perfect scene for somebody who has dealt with coming out. Because part of it was this is a relief. We've known, we wanted it to be your secret for you to say when you felt it was appropriate. But it also reflected on the 90s, because even if you had the family that was supportive then in upper class society, they still would have kept that, like, quiet at that point. Yeah. Like, there were how many celebrities that, like, growing up, looking back in hindsight, you could identify were gay or lesbian, etc. But it just was never talked about.
Yeah, totally. I mean, especially with what I do on TikTok and stuff, Adam Lambert comes up a lot, because Adam was a scandal during American Idol. It was like, is Adam Lambert gay? And we're like, well, do you have eyes and ears? Like, right. And also, he made it a point to say,
and that would have been years after.
And that wasn't even 90s. That was 2000s.
Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah. And even he said, since then, he was like, I wasn't in the closet. Like, I was very out. And, like, the show kept it quiet because it wasn't as internet heavy at the time.
Yeah.
Like, a big corporation could control an internet narrative at that point.
Yeah. But the mom gives a few, like, great examples. She's like, yeah, my mom always knows. Plus, 4 of our houses caught on fire, and apparently your yacht was invaded by Somali pirates, but off the Hamptons, which is Long Island, New York.
Yeah.
I don't get me wrong. Somali pirates, real thing in real life. They're not making it to the Hamptons.
Yeah. Yeah. She was so close.
Yeah.
She was so close.
Yeah. And then she even is like, oh, and you must be one of the X-Men, and recognizes Jubilee. And it's like, oh, I'm glad he's not going through this on her own. And then the record scratch of like, so now the only thing is we just have to make sure that we keep it private. And it's like, that's the fucking 90s still at that point. Yeah. Because they are worried about shareholders.
Which, as a business, yeah, but like, that's your fucking son, man. Like,
but that was the experience then in the 90s though, dude. That's the problem. Like, as if a parent was saying that today, I judge it differently than how these characters are written for the 90s. Like, obviously it's not the right thing, but it's also like, yeah, that is how it was handled in the 90s. Like, that part was incredibly authentic.
To a little bit of her credit, she was probably, it was shareholders, but she was also probably thinking like his survival.
Yeah. So. I mean, there are phrases that she says, like the unpleasantness in Genosha, which is just the most condescending way of saying like all these people fucking died. But it's also like, yeah, to your point, she is worried about his safety as well, especially if he's literally been kidnapped by people like the Friends of Humanity,
Yeah. Oh, and she doesn't even know about that yet.
No. But she knows people like that exist. Remember from the prequel comic, which is, according to Marvel, this is in canon, like, it was known that Dazzler was abducted by the Friends of Humanity when she was going to do that Xavier Memorial concert. So then we come back to Mexico City. Rogue is awakened by Nightcrawler, and it looks like it's essentially Day of the Dead. Is festivities the right word, or memorials? I'm not totally sure what the proper phrasing is. So
this sets the section in the fall, then, right?
Right, and we knew that it was roughly a year from the stuff with Lilandra bringing Xavier over too, so that puts it in November essentially, because Day of the Dead, I believe, is November 1st, and apologies to anybody if I'm getting that wrong.
Look at this up. Yep, November 1st through the 2nd.
So that puts it at roughly 1 year, because it was November 11th, 1996 was the death certificate for Xavier, roughly.
The quote-unquote death.
Yeah, the death certificate that had no body associated to it. Somebody, I don't know what they did to get through that.
That's a President Kelly thing.
Yeah. Hey, could you pronounce our guy dead? We're not going to show you where he is or the body. It's fine. And that's where I think we see the tail end of that breakdown, where she knows that Gambit is dead, but that doesn't mean that she's ready to accept it. You get this great like brother-sister line between them, and she's like, wow, you really lost the lottery when it came to step-siblings. Somebody who loses their mind over losing a guy.
Nightcrawler stepped up where in Storm's absence, is like, no, 2 guys.
No.
Although, to his credit, it was only the beginning of a nicer sentence.
Right, where he's like, yeah, but she's not the reason that they died.
She was responsible for them living. And I was like, that's why I fucking love Nightcrawler in this show. Like, this is what like a religious leader should be doing with their people and their family, like supporting everybody in like a real, like, material way.
Right. Yeah, it was great. And that's where they're hugging, and there's like the pullback, and you see that everybody except for Jubilee and Roberto are there, and they're like, we're going to fix this together kind of scenario.
I was waiting for Morph to be like, Jubilee is helping her boyfriend come out to his mom. Okay, that makes about as much sense as everything.
Yeah. And they just have the perfect like pose, like they're ready to like pose for an album cover or something like that.
Oh yeah. But it was really sweet to see her family there. Like, they all, no matter how crazy things got that day, they flew to fucking Mexico.
Right. On the other side of Mexico City, Gyrick is in a bed. He has a heart monitor next to him in a room that's still playing opera. And
it was LACMA. I don't actually know how to pronounce this, but I know this piece. It's very recognizable.
It's the Flower.
It was like Act 1. I don't know opera very well, but
yeah, it was Act 1, the Flower Duet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Also, in the same orchestra that played earlier. I'm sure that's not an in-universe thing, and that's more like a meta, like that's what they could license thing, but also a 2020 recording.
Yeah. I mean, To be fair, the instruments probably haven't changed that much, Rod.
Yeah.
You know. And then we're saying it for the sake of saying it, but Bastion walks in. It's still this like unknown shadowy figure. And then we were laughing because when watching it at Scum and Villainy, I noticed that the captions spoil the character before the episode says who it is.
Yeah, that was funny. It's funny because when that happened, I think I was expecting him so much. That wasn't really a spoiler for me, but I was trying to figure. I was also preoccupied because I was like, "What is the importance of Purple People Eater?" And then I had the realization in real time with you, saying there was like Purple People. Oh my god,
he's all in purple. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking first the Sentinels. I was like, oh, flying Purple People Eaters, like these literally flying purple robots that eat people. I guess they don't eat them, but close enough.
Yeah. They devour them. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hilarious to me that the line that is given, it literally says, parentheses, Bastion, and parentheses, you nearly ruined my big surprise.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't even think about that.
And it was literally the caption would have been ruining the surprise for anybody who was watching with captions if they did not have that. And it was one of those things that's so meta that it makes me laugh that 99.9% of people won't realize it.
So. Little bit of insight too. I think that means that whoever captioned it didn't do a great job, because I have a friend that proofreads captions for big media, like not for this show, but for
Rod, you're going to get somebody fired.
Right. Well, this person I'm talking about will not be fired because he is the one that showed me. Now, I might get in trouble if I had named him because I don't know if he was supposed to show me, because this was all the work from home stuff, over the pandemic. But in scenes like that, this friend told me it's actually supposed to say unknown voice or male voice.
Yeah.
Until the character's revealed.
Right.
So putting a character's name in there of someone who hasn't been named earlier was a goof on whoever captioned it.
Technically, is his name ever actually said in the episode?
I don't think so.
I don't think it is. Even with the later shot with Sinister, I don't think it's said.
Yeah.
We know it because of the comic, but I don't remember his name being said out loud.
Yeah.
So he literally murders Gyrick.
Right.
Zero holding back. You see him put his face or his hands on top of Gyrick's face and smothers him with his bare pseudo-sentinel hands.
But I also kind of got the sense he removed whatever the sentinel thing was, right? Because otherwise Gyrick would have just turned into the thing.
So I don't know if Gyrick was infected with the stuff that we're going to see Trask infected with, or if it was nano sentinels, little tiny bitty sentinels is what triggers it.
Uh-huh.
If he, to your point, did he pull those out as he was doing it as well?
I got
or
that.
Maybe he could just be I just say no and they just give up.
Oh, there you go.
Because he's got the trigger essentially.
Because I thought that part of Gyrick's confidence was oh, if you put me down, I'm just going to come back stronger,
I don't think Gyrick knew about it.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. And then as he walks out, the radio goes back to the original song. See, they take the jet to Madripoor. Oh, sorry. That is actually the last shot from the original trailer, the shot of Madripoor. That was in the original trailer, too.
Oh, okay. I didn't put that together.
Yep. And you see this UN building that it says in some form of kanji writing. I'm not sure which language it's written in, but it literally says Horizon.
Oh, okay.
And Horizon was introduced years later in the comics. That is the lab where Peter Parker is actually a scientist. It's an offshoot of that company. But in a later shot, you see it zoomed out. It's in between Roxxon, which we know is involved in various things, as well as Hammer, which was Justin Hammer's company from the Iron Man movies.
The only one I recognized was the Stark Towers, which is much later.
There's a Stark one, Vista Corp, which is where Scott Lang worked. And then there's Yoshida, which is, I could be wrong on this one, so apologies if I am, but I believe Yoshida is the Silver Samurai's company that is in the comics, not necessarily the Silver Samurai we saw in 92.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you go in and you see all these passed out guards and stuff like that.
I thought we were seeing a lobby full of corpses.
Yeah. Wolverine quickly reveals that it is sleeping gas. Everybody's out cold. And Morph very excitedly runs up to the vending machine, grabs a Diet Pingo, Pingo, which is a nod to the MCU, because that was what Stan Lee drank in The Incredible Hulk that got him sick.
Okay, I knew I recognized him somewhere.
Yep.
Or Did it get him sick? It killed him, right?
Did it kill him? I don't remember. Dude, I haven't watched The Incredible Hulk in so long. That's one of the only ones I've never rewatched. That, Eternals, and Thor Dark World are the only ones I've never rewatched.
I rewatched all of those.
I'm sorry.
I like them.
And apparently Pingo is also in the news clipping in the Deadpool trailer. There's like a newspaper in the desert as he's like laying on the ground with Wolverine like stabbing him. That is there as well. So Morph opens the pop top to the can. They all get in the elevator, and that was one of the laugh out loud moments where everybody's cramped into this elevator and he's just slurping as he's drinking the soda.
I love the trope of superheroes in an elevator, or like just superpowered or really tough people in an elevator just waiting.
Just awkwardly waiting. They get out of the elevator and you see these futuristic like androids, cybernetics, etc. And I didn't pick up on this until the second watch when the captions were on. Trask is actually talking about his original Sentinels in the voiceover that's going on. It's like him listening to his old recordings. And he says, Asimov's laws be damned. You know what the Asimov's laws are?
No.
Those are the rules to robotics. And the number one rule is a robot can't hurt a human being.
Oh, that's what the thing in iRobot.
Well, it's all robots. It's not specific to iRobot, but it's referenced in iRobot.
That was like the main point of iRobot, right? And then I caught like a thing about MK1,
which was the original Mark I Sentinels. Yeah. So those are his originals, which we find out in a few minutes. Sinister literally referred to as being cute designs. Mm-hmm. And if you follow the thought process on that, Asimov's laws be damned. They have to be, because otherwise, remember, Master Mold said, well, mutants are humans.
Yeah.
So he literally had to program them to ignore that law because they wouldn't have killed mutants if they thought they were humans.
That's wild.
Yeah. Rogue spots there's guards. There's more of the OZT people there. And Morph that was the line of the episode where Morph is like, oh, well, maybe we should do something about poor man's Oppenheimer.
So great.
Yeah. And he's like standing there on the edge. I got the vibe he was a little bit drunk too. Like
something, yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe the sleeping gas?
Oh. Maybe. I don't know. But he was not in good shape. And he literally gives the Oppenheimer line of, now I am become death.
Yeah. And did you get the sense that he knew what was going to happen, so that's why he wanted to jump? That's what he was trying to show them? Or was it just the robotics inside the building?
What do you mean? Like, what do you...
I took that as, especially knowing what happens in a little bit, that he was going to jump either way, just to show the X-Men like what they were going to be up against times infinity.
I think he felt like it was going to be his form of redemption, because he starts going through like this little speech of like, I made these because I wanted to protect humanity. I don't think he viewed building the Sentinels originally as machines to lead to murder, and it just kind of got out of hand. Mm-hmm. I think he was building, like, in his mind, super cops. So he was building machines to restrain as opposed to machines to murder, and then shit just got out of control.
It's kind of like Iron Man's thing in the MCU with Ultron.
Right.
He wanted to make like a shield around the planet, but he ended up making like a homicidal robot network.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of how I got it. And he mentions that OZT came out of his original program, so he's kind of just stuck in it as opposed to like being the lead of it. And what he's like, yeah, dominoes have been getting placed. Mentions, like I said, Sinister mentioned that his ideas were cute. And Morph is the one who, looking at one of these things, is like, oh, these are new Sentinels. And it was that perfect timing of mentioning Sinister and seeing Morph on the screen at the same time. And he actually, Trask says, oh, it's going to be worse than Genosha. So I think at that point, he's ready to just off himself because, he doesn't want to deal with that grief anymore in his life.
Yeah, which calls back to when he begs Sinister to just kill him.
Beast comments that the tech is light years ahead of where they are right now. And I think that goes into the theory that I'll get into later. And Trask is basically like, yeah, Sinister's not even the one in charge. He has somebody bigger. And then he starts to jump. Rogue catches him and it's like, you gotta give me something more. Like, help us catch the bad guy. And Trask is like, I have nothing. And then, like, the most bone-chilling line of, like, all these moments from Rogue was when she goes, same, sugar. I mean, for me, it was like, she's literally saying she has nothing left in her life right now with the loss of Gambit.
And they animated it with like the vignette of like it was like shadowed on the edges, so you just see like her lips.
Yeah, and then the like her hair was like soaking wet, so it wasn't like the gorgeous version of Rogue that we're used to. It's like, oh, she's in a dark spot right now. And then drops him. And I do love in the captions where it was like a crash, woman screaming.
Yeah. And they did it that like not drop like the limited frame rate where you only saw like 4 frames of him falling. It was just like still, like.
Yeah. It was like animatic style almost. Yeah. Nightcrawler is just completely shocked. Wolverine gave like his best line of the entire season for me. Was like, yeah, she just did what we all wanted to do, and then drops his claws back down. And then Morph is like, is this who we are now?
I love Morph catching up with the team. Like, I missed out on some stuff for a couple years.
Yeah. Were you guys doing this the whole time I was gone? And then Rogue is basically like unloading on the team, and she's justifying what she just did. And then it's such a quick shot. Like the first time watching it, I actually didn't realize there's a frame of a punch coming in and hits her. I thought it was just an explosion the first time I watched it.
I didn't even catch that.
Dude, it is literally like I'm like triple tapping my keyboard to see, and it's like 3 frames or something really fast.
I only caught that she finally confirmed a number. She said thousands were killed in Genosha. So now we know it wasn't like the comic like 16 million. 16
million. And then it's such a strong hit from whatever weapon he's created with this like robotic fist, for lack of a better term. It literally like takes out most of the floor.
Yeah, I thought we saw like another Genosha because it just
with the team.
Yeah, and with Rogue again, poor Rogue.
Yeah. So Scott is the first to like get back up. He's under the rubble. Rogue is taken down. Like she is out cold, probably from absorbing so much of that. And then this robotic version of Trask that has kind of like cybernetic like stuff under his veins popping up through his skin and lit up. And he does the like reverse of his head like the fucking Exorcist. Like same as the owl like type shit for me. And the building starts to collapse. As that's happening, Nightcrawler is able to snag Rogue. And they give a great shot of Jean and Scott working together for really the first time this season.
And Jean has leveled up.
Yeah. Where they jump out. He is taking out like stray debris that could be landing on people, but she's literally catching the building, which just want to point out, there are probably dead people there now because she throws it into the bay of Madripoor. If there were people on any of the floors above them, they are now drowning in the bay.
Oh, so. Yeah, because they were just asleep from sleeping gas. And now, and also Beast and Logan are just, we don't know how they got down. We saw them land. We don't see how they got from the top floor to the bottom. Yeah, Jean is pointing out that she still senses some of Trask's mind in this thing. Scott says, well, it took out Rogue in one hit. No pulling back. And then Morph turns into Quicksilver. And we actually got confirmation from this on Twitter where Bo mentions that when Morph turns into a character, they are able to replicate powers based on physical attributes. So they're able to do things like be bouncy like Blob or really move fast like Quicksilver, but wouldn't be able to replicate something like Magneto's magnetism or Jean's telepathy, telekinetic powers. Proceeds to punch Bastion repeatedly across the face, very much Flash style, and it has no effect. And then for a second, it looks like they blast Morph and their head pops and it looks like it's fatal, but then I think the concession there is because of Morph's abilities, that head pop is not a fatal thing, but it's still a really gruesome thing when like their head turns to goo for a half second. Yeah, I kind of took it as like, well, yeah, goo's a good way to put it, like undoing the Play-Doh, kind of. But also, it took that punch for me to realize, because at first I was like, what the fuck is Pietro doing there? I missed the morph at the beginning, because it was so quick. It was just like a blink. And it happened, and I was like, wait, what the heck? And it's like, oh, okay, this was Morph. That makes sense. Logan
and Beast try to go at it with Bastion, are completely unsuccessful. They both get neutralized. And they were really specific about saying neutralized as opposed to terminated. Don't know if you noticed that part. Jean and Trask like start having an anime fight where they're flying into the sky. And
it's very Dragon Ball.
Just like fucking light things popping at each other, and Jean gets smashed into the side of a car like she's Rogue.
Yeah.
blasts him, and Trask is like walking through the optic blast, gets to Scott, puts him on the ground, is like, remember what my old version said in the Sahara? Like, how does it feel to be left behind? And then the EMP grenade lands next to it. And that was probably the second loudest pop of the audience for that, I think, at Scum last night.
Yeah. And when I watched this the first time at home, I was like, okay, so that has to be some future tech, because otherwise Cyclops just got decapitated.
It's electromagnetic. It only fries his brain, you know.
He had a stroke.
Yeah. So Scott, for just being rescued, is like slightly confrontational because he's like, Cable, what the hell are you doing here? And it's like, dude, he literally just saved your life.
Yeah, that's the Scott we knew. Oh, and then this is the shot where we see the Stark Industries tower.
Yes. Yep. Right before the EMP goes off and everybody loses power.
Yeah. And I don't know why I noticed this time. Maybe it's because it's where the shot like lied when they pulled in on a Cable. Because at first you just see Cable from the back. Whoever animated that shot gave Cable like just a square for a butt. It was like just right. They could have put nothing there and it just would have been like a figure walking up, but it was just like a box. He walked up and was like, oh, weird looking butt. Anyway,
we call that Rob Liefeld style.
The just feet in the Deadpool trailer.
Good. So Jean, for some reason, has this like quick psychic flash with Cable, realizes that Maddie saw Cable right before everything that happened in Genosha, and then realizes it and is like, oh shit. And she's kind of like in denial about it for a second. And Cable says, get out of my brain. You're not her. And that's when it triggers for Scott. And then Cable, just being like the ruthless soldier from the future, is like, yeah, sorry, this isn't more like a heartwarming reunion, but we have to, we got to stop this or shit's going to get worse.
Yeah. I also have to believe that part of him knows that Scott was like, I'm never going to leave my son as I leave my son.
Right. Maddie left that part in. So then it goes to the dark ending of the episode where we see Bastion and Sinister. And Sinister is doubting Bastion's methods, where he's like, oh, yeah, I don't understand how this method is going to get me that prize that you promised me. Mm-hmm. And, they was basically like, you should have just waited. You should have like made sure we had everything done and just overwhelm them and take them all out at once. And then the best thing that I think only works in a cartoon that is 30 years old is said, where it's like, yeah, you and the villains of old have been failing since 1992.
That was an awesome line.
Yeah. And he's like, well, you used to be one of those villains too. And he's like, yeah, but I evolved.
So that was the thing that I'm proud of myself for recognizing. And I was telling my friend Max, I was like, okay, so here, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen, but this might be a spoiler if I'm right. And this is the only informed thing I think I've made all season. This is like, so I think that, I guess, potential spoiler.
It's not a spoiler if we're caveating it as a theory.
Yeah, I'm just guessing. It sounds like they're heavily implying, this is what I told my friend, they're heavily implying that Bastion is an evolved Nimrod, specifically the Nimrod from One Man's Worth. And they're going to explain that somehow. But then also that maybe Bastion is trying to like kind of do this Back to the Future, like own grandfather thing. Uh-huh. So because he was in that photo with Forge earlier, means that Bastion might have been responsible for Sentinels just being created in general. And so because the first episode of 92 was Night of the Sentinels, Bastion has been responsible for everything from Jubilee on that the X-Men have to deal with.
At the very least, that Bastion had something to do with the origin of the Genosian collars because of working with Forge in that picture where it was Bastion cut off slightly, Forge, and the Doctor.
Oh, Adler. Yeah. So we don't know what point came in, but then I guess this is not a spoiler because Bo posted it today, and you sent me a screenshot too, that like it's Bastion all along, like Agatha, for this season at least.
Except for episode 3.
Oh, that he's in every episode, yeah.
In every episode. So the Jean flashback, the Maddie flashback when they were reading Gyric's mind was the first exposure. You see a kid drawing, so that's a young Bastion. You saw in 2, they're actually sitting at the table with all the world leaders next to Val Cooper. In 3, we skipped, obviously. 4, in Life Death, you saw them in the photo. 5, they were walking through the Hellfire Gala.
I love that was, I think that was an Eric Voss call, right? And it was almost like it was like, oh, I swear to God, this is gonna be a Mephisto, because he was only just like a hairline, right?
Right. And certain people online were arguing that the haircut of Bastion was more of like the slick back versus like this was more of like a part scenario. But that was just what they swapped with character design.
Yeah.
Yep. And I forgot what it was in episode 6, honestly.
Yeah, but like that, it's such a.
Oh, sorry. It was the speculation of the globe that was glowing purple.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's so it was the Dominoes line that's been brought up at least twice now. I'm like, okay, so I think this is gonna probably reference all the way back to the original series.
I think my theory is, in One Man's Worth, that all still happened because we know Xavier remembered that happening, and he never told Wolverine or Storm about it. But that means when Bishop shot the Nimrod in the 60s, it was 60s, right? Like late 60s, like 69 or something like that.
I can't remember. What?
It was 50s or 60s.
Yeah, I think 50s maybe, but yeah.
Right. That the tech survives somehow, and that would merge eventually with Master Mold to create Bastion.
Yeah, and Nimrod probably still has a vendetta against Xavier, right? Because that was...
I mean, that's his primary target, yeah.
So that's the thing that kind of stuck.
Yeah, to your point of like, it's Back to the Future, like you create your own grandfather kind of scenario. And then we see he's had some repairs to a satellite or Shi'ar tech, and they do the reveal for Sinister, because Sinister at this point also thought that Xavier was dead, and they see him being revealed by Lilandra and that whole crew. And then, like, the creepiest ending scene possible for the episode. Yeah. Going into an abandoned, overgrown barbershop, and you get the reveal that Magneto's still alive, which we had speculated on, that we didn't think he was fully gone, that only Gambit was the fatality from that. And he has a Genosian collar on him, and he's strapped to a barber's chair, and he's getting shaved by Bastion as Purple People Eater is playing.
Do you think this is implying that Bastion's turning Magneto into one of the Prime Sentinels?
I think that is a big part of it, and he's going to have some level of control in trying to set off this war. And that's why we got like that illusion that this is just the opening salvo with Genosha, because if they put Magneto in the classic like villain outfit again, and he's going out there and raising hell, even if he has no control over it, people aren't going to care why. They're just going to care that it's him, and they're going to want to stop mutants.
This is a really clever way to take his character, because it kind of makes both things happen that we thought was going to happen. Like, he was genuine in wanting to do the right thing by Charles, but he'll still be the bad guy, but kind of not really. He
also has the line that is going to get used against him by the media of, don't prove me right, or something to that extent. I forgot the specific wording.
When he brought the whole council up to the over the atmosphere.
Yeah, because those people will absolutely remember, like, oh, we didn't do this thing with the Sentinel. He's attacking all these innocent people, so we have to take him down because he threatened us last time.
So my last little surprise that I'm waiting to figure out is if Apocalypse is going to drop into this at all, because of him being in the credits and stuff, but also if Cooper is Mystique, how that's going to fall into all this.
Right.
Like, it's got to be something, right?
I still have my doubts about Apocalypse. Yeah. Anything is on the table at this point, as I've said and learned about this series and stuff. But I think if I have to pick which one I think is more likely of Mystique being Val or Apocalypse being involved in some capacity, I lean towards the Mystique theory, because I think it's too big that you have Sinister, Apocalypse, and Bastion together. Yeah. And maybe it's just like it's the Temple of Time at the end of the universe, that like that was how Sinister escaped and messed with the timeline to create Bastion or something to that extent. Mm-hmm. I feel like you save him for like next season or something like that.
Or Apocalypse is like the end of the season stinger.
That's with Remy.
Oh, that would be crazy. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, because that's the question is, like, a lot of people are saying, well, how do you bring him back? And is there a way to bring back a body? And if you bring back a body, is the person still the person they were beforehand?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of stuff to look forward to. But I can't believe that we waited for this for 2 years, and now we're literally in the finale. Like, the next time we talk about this, we're going to be beginning the finale.
Yeah, it's wild to think that that's going to be the case. And then we do know that for week 8 and week 9, they are still doing the watch parties at Scum and Villainy. At the time of recording, we do not know who's going to be there for weeks 8 and 9, but I'd be shocked if, it's not at least 2 or 3 members of the team. And like you were saying, every week Guy is there just like hanging out and like supporting his friends and chilling and everything like that, which is great.
And I think David would have been there last week, except I saw a post from him that he was actually at a premiere for something else he was in that's literally down the street from where I live. I was like, how ironic is it? I was on the other side of town when you were like next door.
Right. So, yeah, you cursed us like we thought you were going to.
Oh, right.
Yeah, man, like this nailed it. It's the 3rd highest rated episode of the series right now, because it was obviously Remember It is number 1, and then episode 2 is the second one. But this is still an 8.8, like everything falls into the top rated category on IMDb right now, which is wild.
Yeah, no, I like it. Like I said, this was the first one of these episodes where I had absolutely no idea what was going on, but it was still done so well that I liked it. I was like, oh man, this is like I was 10 again. And I'm like, what's going to happen next?
Right. And then the internet filled in all the blank spots for you in the next 2 days.
Well, kind of. It's filling some blanks, but I still don't know what's going to happen next. Like,
I fully agree. Yeah, like I don't feel like this is like, it's not watching the Dark Phoenix saga, which was a truncated version of the Dark Phoenix comics. Like this feels like new stories and stuff, because like, yeah, everybody was speculating Genosha was going to be the Cassandra Nova story, especially with the Deadpool movie coming out. And there is nothing in any way, shape, or form that is indicating Cassandra Nova is involved with this at all, and I love that.
Yeah. And even with my, theory of like Bastion's gonna be responsible for the entire X-Men animated series or whatever, I still don't know how it arrives there.
Right.
So that's why that's very cool.
Yep. Well, thank you guys for joining us. If you have any thoughts, make sure to drop them into the comments for either the YouTube upload or the official Instagram post about this episode. And if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on the podcast app of your choosing. They honestly do really help us out when it comes to being discovered by people on the various services. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, and CastBox, and sleep.